Hello, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm Bonnie Burkert, here to share tools for transformation, to live your highest truth. I think part of finding one's truth is to get into a regular routine with meditation, just taking care of yourself. But in this case, we're going to talk about what that routine looks like in a spiritual practice, and very specifically, more along the studies of Wiccan practice. So I've invited Lisa McSherry to talk to us about her book, The Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. Hello, Lisa.
Hello there.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to go to, I had a quick chance to look at your book, and congratulations on the new book. And one of the questions you pose in the intro is, why be a witch? Can I ask you that? Tell me why.
Because I think it is one of the better worn paths, if you will, to a personal spirituality that focuses on our being whole people within the world and our best selves within the world. It is a path that requires personal responsibility and sort of taking charge of your life to the largest degree that you possibly can at any given moment. And I think it gives you those tools all the time to transform yourself, to borrow your phrase, into the better person that you can be at any given moment.
No, I love that. And I like that as the ultimate goal, right? Because maybe people might have the notion, and again, I mean, witches and witchcraft has a lot of negative connotations that have been fed to us through media. But really, it's about, I think there's a legacy to it. I think it often involves nature and listening to the rhythms of nature. But I think there's ceremony and ritual in it, to use that word again, that helps us stay on that path. So that's, part of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. We just to interrupt slightly. We live in a society that has a lot of vested interest in keeping us disempowered and keeping us from being our best selves, because if we're not thinking things through, if we're not thinking about the consequences of our actions, then we can be a little bit mindless, and we can be, it's just easy to just sort of float along and go wherever the powers that be would like us to go, as opposed to taking a harder, more rigorous path that actually brings us closer to whatever you want to call it, deity, godhood, enlightenment, our better selves.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, very much so. Now, let's take it back a little bit. You've been, you discovered the practice, various forms of practice already as a teenager. So do you want to tell us what that was like, and how, when you knew this was the right practice for you?
I knew almost immediately, which I think is actually a fairly common refrain when people find the spiritual path that they best fit. It was not a palpable click, but something very, very akin to, I looked at words on a page and they described a reality that I wanted to be a part of with every fiber of my being. It was a nearly ecstatic moment that I still remember quite clearly, even though it was quite a few decades ago, to be honest. And the discovery that there was this practice that was out there that people were starting to describe publicly, because the information had been out for a couple of decades at that point. But, here was this woman, quite frankly, Starhawk, the Spiral Dance.
Sure.
Thank you, Starhawk. I have to keep thanking you. Who just put into words this ability to be in the world and be in control of my reality, which is deeply seductive for a teenager. We all remember how utterly maddening the teen years are. And to have this path where I could actually use my own personal power to exert control over reality. And I saw that almost immediately. And it was not a huge thing. Obviously, my life did not immediately calm down, and I did not magically sail through the rigors of adolescence. But nonetheless, I saw immediate positive changes that formed a very nice little positive feedback loop to keep doing this and keep being this way in the world, which is carried through my life.
Can you share an example? I mean, was it a lighting of a candle, incense, journaling, chanting? I mean, what was it that helped you get that click almost? I mean, you mentioned the book, and I'm familiar with Starhawk's book as well, The Spiral Dance. It's it's an incredible. It's almost like encyclopedia for us. It's a Bible of sorts. It's a sacred text. And but I mean, what did you do? How did you take off those pages? Because I remember when I first read it, it felt a little formal to me. Some of the practice, the words that were being used felt a little bit formal, old world. And so what did you derive from that? How did you glean from that? This is for people that maybe don't have a practice just yet.
Absolutely. For me in particular, the words were a little daunting. I mean, what the heck is a watchtower? And like, I'm suddenly going to the four directions and calling on them. How can I invite someone I haven't ever met? So yes, it was very, very daunting. And again, I'm a teenager, so I didn't have any experience even throwing a dinner party where uninvited guests had shown up in my life. But what worked for me was that moment when I lit a candle and closed my eyes and found a stillness that had been lacking in my life. And in that moment, I felt a very deep connection to the divine, to deity. And that was when I knew it was real, because that connection was there. And I didn't try all that hard to make that connection happen. I didn't have the possibility of buying incense or doing any more actually than lighting a candle, because I was in my parents' house and I didn't want to create a practice that they were aware of. Actually, I was a very private teenager, as many teenagers are.
Yeah.
But I felt that connection. And it was as clear as actual words being spoken that I was welcome and this was the right place to be. And in fact, when I did my formal dedication ceremony, I just made it up. I threw the words that seemed to make sense at the time. I didn't try to rhyme. I didn't try to find someone else's words to use. I just offered up my very heartfelt me in all of my sentences that I'll do this. And that's part of the magic, if I could use the phrase, of witchcraft, is that you don't have to use someone else's words. You can be informal and have it still work. The power is still there, because the power is within yourself, and we are simply connecting what Starhawk calls our immanent deity, the divine that is within all of us, because we are literally divine creatures walking this earth, and we've just forgotten how powerful we are in the mash of the world.
Amen. No, I like that. And I definitely gleaned that from some of the reading I was able to do in your book, that even though there's guidelines, you give really great guidelines, and we can talk more about what, some of the chapter headings and what to expect in the book. But there's also an invitation that this doesn't need to be a regiment.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think that's really, really good, because I know in my yoga practice, I was starting to become exhausted by what I felt needed to be regimentation of, specific to meditations and time of day and length and all of that. And it was, I was starting to have resistance, and that's not good. You got to approach this with joy. You need to be wanting to do it. So if you,
it's almost the opposite of what you want in yoga. Is if you're starting to build up resistance, it's like, nope, wait, stop, time time to pause and take a look at what's going on there. And I think actually that's wonderful. I love hearing that story that you recognize that within yourself, because it's actually kind of hard for us to recognize within the world. We don't get a lot of positive signals for being aware of trouble that's coming to us from inner places and outer places, and resistance is kind of a trouble. It's much easier just to push that away rather than pay attention to it and honor it and do something a little bit more difficult, like
great.
Change your practice.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good way of looking at it. So let's take a quick look at more so at your book, Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. Okay, so you want to give us a few of the steps?
Well, the key, most important step for me is actually starting to write it all down in what we call a book of shadows, because over and over and over again, I find that you lose track of how much progress you've made unless you're actually tracking that progress. And there's something very special about actually writing words out. And I know that this, for some people, this can be really difficult to hear. You don't really like how your handwriting looks on the page, or you don't find it very readable. Believe me, I understand. I have atrocious handwriting. I have looked at my journals over the years, and sometimes I literally cannot read my own writing. And I remember what I wrote. I still can't read what I wrote. So I feel you there. But the process of actually using a pen or pencil or whatever on paper is a trigger in your brain to start paying attention. And when we write down what we see, feel, hear, and understand, we make that important in our lives. And that becomes part of the overall growth and practice that we're starting. And I cannot tell you how amazing it is to look back 3 months later, 6 months later, and see how far you have come, which is particularly important in the inevitable moments when you think that you've gotten nowhere.
Yes.
We just hit our stumbling blocks, and we think, this isn't going anywhere. What? I don't know. But you can look and you go, oh, wait, hey, I didn't used to be able to do this thing. And even if it's small, it's progress, because the idea is progress, not perfection. We will never achieve perfection in our lifetime. Give it up. Just go for progress. I know.
But I'm trying. It's okay. Eat the chocolate.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. You know what? We have multiple lifetimes to get it right. It's okay. Just go on through. That's my personal belief. So anyway, so I believe you just start with writing it down. And then the next step is actually just start creating sacred space. For me, in my tradition of my pathway, I see that as actually creating an altar. I like the word altar, and for me, that is simply a flat surface that you show up at every day. And what you put on that flat surface is up to you. I'm not big on directions or things you need to put there. You'll figure that out as time goes by. Just pick a flat surface that you show up to every day. And that's when you're going to start doing things like meditating, visualizing, relaxing, breathing, energy work, kind of go on from there. There's a whole variety of pathways. But the beginning point is write it down. And the second thing is start creating sacred space. A really interesting thing for me is that when we start to create sacred space, when we start showing up for ourselves in that way, things start to shift in our world and more magical things start to happen. And so it becomes, again, a very positive feedback mechanism that sort of keeps you going and keeps you interested in what's happening. And this is where the individuality comes out of what's necessary for you. And you can start thinking about what it is you want from this path, what it is you want to create from this path. And as far as I'm concerned, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I want more power. I want to be able to create a reality that I want to live in. I want to be able to ask for money when I'm in a tight spot. I want to be able to ask for a better job or a new lover, whatever. Great, go for it. If spell work is your pathway to do it, fantastic. Make that happen for yourself. You deserve it. Everybody deserves it. And it's really important to understand that magic is not like a pie. And if you take a larger slice, someone else is going to get a smaller slice. It's an infinite pool that we can all tap into and work with.
Oh, that's great. And I think that probably the more it's worked, the more others feel it and perhaps get to participate in it and, experiencing it with you. And that's a great invitation again to experience.
I actually think that when we make ourselves better, we make our families better and our loved ones around us better. And then that in turn makes our communities better, which just leads to a better society.
I need to hear that.
I'm very positive that way.
No, it's great. I mean, because we were just talking about the news and how it can be, very exhausting. So thank you for infusing magic and reminding me and anyone else who's listening to this what's really, really important. Okay, so we start off with an intention that maybe is written down. Or maybe we would say we start off with writing, and it may be specifically an intention, right? Okay. And then finding a space that you can find that you can experience and create quietude and focus. All right.
Those are the building blocks. From there, everything else, I'm not going to say it's window dressing. Everything else builds from that. And that was the point of this book, was to sort of get back to a very foundational sense of what actually do you need to do to kind of get started? Because I feel like there's a lot of, frankly, imposter syndrome. It's like, I want to be a witch, but what does that look like? And how do I do that? And there's 15,000 different websites that will tell me different ways.
And I think what does that look like is a big thing, because there may be, a lot of people think that it does need to look like something.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, most people have no idea I'm a witch unless they actually go to my Facebook page, specifically even my Facebook author page, or go to my website. And then they're like, oh, well, wait, I've had friends for years who are like, wait, how many books have you written? And it's like, yeah, I know.
Wow.
I'm on book 4, thanks, because in my normal life, I don't know. Let's pick some stereotypes here. I don't wear large stone jewelry set in heavy metal settings and flowing iridescent or black robes or heavy makeup or I can just pick these stereotypes. I don't have a hat. That would be witchy. It's a sun hat. It has a large red flower on the front of it for when I go out in the sun. But, I never felt called to looking like my spiritual practice. It always seemed a little silly to me. Like you wouldn't know someone's necessarily Catholic, for example, just by looking at them. So why would you need to know that somebody was a witch just by looking at them?
Right, exactly. But I don't want to negate it, because if that helps people get into that energy, if that's transformational for them, to then better practice, walk that talk, more power to them. But I think it's
absolutely.
I think when we're looking at,
I think it's, and I think actually glamour magic, the putting on of a magical persona is so much fun, actually. And if you can do that in your daily life and walk around, fantastic, go for it. I think that's really great. There are a lot of people, particularly beginners, who can get caught in the glamour of it as opposed to the magical part of it. And there are a lot of people who can't feel safe if they look witchy. whatever that means to them, because of where they are in their environment or the politics or all sorts of things. So it's
It
not
draws
at all
attention.
required.
It draws attention to you. And I think
Exactly.
it's still something that it's sacred and it's private.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily in that order, but yeah, that's very, very interesting to look at it. So I'd like to talk to you. Now, I've asked this question of other fellow authors from Llewellyn who've been on my show, and what do you make of this interest? I think ever growing interest in witchcraft and the practice. I mean, is it becoming is it jumping the shark? or I mean, to use that term that may not be for all, but I mean, is it becoming a bit too much, and it's glamour and it's not real reverence, proper reverence?
So, so the funny part is I was asked that question 20 years ago when I published my first book.
Wow.
So,
interesting.
To a certain degree, my answer is going to be the same, which is that there's always going to be people who are interested in witchcraft because it's flashy, because it's the next thing, because it's, the new trend on whatever the new social media platform is. Always. There were people who were called dilettantes because they were interested in witchcraft after reading a book by Scott Cunningham back in the day. And that wasn't legit enough for other people. So I think that any spiritual path that brings you any positive, anything, energy, place in the world, peace, closer to a better self, is good. I'm pretty basic on that level, and so witchcraft has deeper levels for people who want to go deeper.
So
and there are plenty of
happened?
people for whom it's just enough to light a candle and have a quiet moment.
Well, right, exactly. And I mean, a lot of it, I think for me, I probably had a real awakening around, let's just call it paganism, around the holidays. And I've certainly spoken about this in other interviews. But just watching the seasons, but our holidays are around the seasons. But then when you start to have the awareness that a lot of the holidays and celebrations, the celebrations, the way we celebrate, are founded in something that would be considered pagan, it's like, it's interesting, and it makes you want to look a little bit more. But I also think it brings that much more. I like the word reverence, and it makes it that much more special for every holiday. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're on the brink of Halloween.
I mean, it's a great excuse to hold a party about every 6 weeks. It's another way of looking at it. And, if you just want to get together for a party every 6 weeks with your best friends, your mates, fantastic, go for it. I think that is as reverent as anybody who only goes to church twice a year on the high holy days. There are plenty of people in lots of religions who just go twice a year and don't really think about it any other time. Okay, great. I take nothing away from that. So, yes, there's a burgeoning interest. There was a burgeoning interest 10 years ago. There's a burgeoning interest 20 years ago. There were dilettantes 50 years ago. It's, the right people find it, and the right people go forward with it and deepen it. And some of those people who, 20 years ago were told that they weren't serious enough are some of the people writing some of the most interesting books right now and doing some of the more fascinating work that's out there. And I love seeing that.
So it's the evolution that you're talking about. And I mean, this is also something that you were giving some backstory to Gardner, right? And is it Gerald? What's his first name?
Gerald Gardner.
And right, and his book on Wicca, which was just from the 50s, right? Am I correct with that? I mean, that's incredibly recent.
Oh, yeah.
So it just goes to show
60 years.
Yeah. It just goes to show how it continues to evolve. Now, you've been now you've had a group, you're in Portugal now, but prior to that, you were in the Pacific Northwest, and you had a group that you were teaching, guiding, leading, right, for a while, correct?
20 years.
Yeah.
Since the year 2000. We're on our 22nd year.
Yeah. Amazing. So thank you, Zoom, for keeping us all connected. And I know that I take advantage of that for my spiritual group as well. So, no, it just goes to show you that you're a keeper of the flame. So there's a lot of the traditions and certainly the rhythms of our seasons and lunar cycles, which is a great way to also look at it and demystify it to a certain extent.
Absolutely. It's, there is always an energy that's found in the natural world, and we can feel very disassociated from it. I mean, I've had plenty of people who tell me prior to the pandemic, quite honestly, that, you can never do magic online. You can never teach magic online. You can't do ritual online. It's impossible to do all of those things. And then, 2+ years ago, we all went into lockdown, and suddenly everyone went, whoa, if I'm going to have any kind of spiritual life, I need to figure out how to do this online. And, so here we are, and it does work. It's different. It does work. My group, yes, is still going on, and I'm still working with them, still leading and teaching with them. They do classes at 6 p.m. Pacific time, which means that I get up at 1:30 in the morning to be with them at 2 a.m. my time.
That's incredible.
So Zoom is fantastic, but time zones don't change.
That is true, but that's commitment, Lisa. That is amazing. And
it's been really interesting, particularly since I am a morning person. I am up with the dawn, or was up with the dawn. So doing things in the middle of the night is pretty much the strangest time for me energetically. And it's been fascinating to have to shift my energy and my practice to work with that after, decades of being able to be very directive and everyone has to be on my time frame and do what I say. It's like, well, no one will show up if I want to do this at, a reasonable hour.
Yeah, well, it's middle night. I mean, once upon a time, that was a really magical time, wasn't it? I mean, when we were going to bed when the sun set at 7 p.m. or something like that, right? You were ready to probably be up at 2. And
exactly. It's been really interesting, and I have been learning so much, writing so much about it, and I have things to say going forward. I also lived without an altar or any of my tools for a year as I shifted over into this new life, and that was a fascinating experience of how does one do magic without the accoutrements? What's actually necessary? I have thoughts.
All is magic. I mean, a magic could be a flower that you find walking along or a bird flying above, right? I mean, that's interesting. That's interesting. And yet I find that in my travels, if I don't have some of the tools I like, I'm big into candles. So I always have a candle going. And I remember going to Mexico and thinking, what I was leaving behind in New York and my magical stores that I'd love to go to. But then, of course, in Mexico, my God, it was an incredible wellspring of herbs and incense and of course, a million different candles and jars and whatnot. So it's funny how we project that we think we're not going to have what we need, but it's actually fully there. So it's really good. And that's magic. And I just want to let people know it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal incantation or sitting in a certain direction on a certain day. It really can be just a simple, I think it can be the clarity. That's my word of the year, 2022, when this is recorded, is clarity. So clarity of intention, focus.
That's a good one. Clarity is a really good word of the year. Mine has been adaptation, adapt.
Ah, okay.
So it was just, I've been holding that one.
Okay. Well, you've only got a few more months to go, so.
Only a few more months. Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll check in and you'll let me know what your 2023 word is. It's way too soon for me to figure that one out, but I definitely, and again, it goes back to writing and I think speaking. I've certainly heard that from other guests along the way that talk about spell work. The importance of the spoken intention, being able to say it out loud. And I think maybe when you write it down, it's a good first start. But maybe then there's more clarity and power if you're able to actually speak it as well, articulate it.
Absolutely. And that's actually a really important part of spell work or ritual work, is stating the intent of what it is that you're about to do. Because I think it's really, you could start with something kind of vague. I need a better job. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what does it mean to be better? What does that mean for you? And doing that work of actually sort of thinking about, is it better hours, shorter hours, more pay, a shorter commute? There's a whole variety of things that would make, a better job for you different than a better job for me, for example. But sitting and thinking about what those things do, because you have to do that to figure out the symbols that you want to use in your ritual. Because, the color brown, I think, is traditional for employment work. Mm. But if your associations with the color brown are mud, as opposed to compost, for example, you're going to have a real different reaction to lighting that brown candle. Yeah. It's going to be kind of, I'm lighting a brown candle.
Yeah, it just feels kind of boring.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, a better candle, for example, to use for an employment spell might be gold. Hey, let's lighten things up, And so you think about the symbology of what you're trying to bring into your life, and that's all the things that you put together in your spell work. And then saying it out loud to the universe, to deity, to a specific name, whatever is calling for that particular working, clarifies it. And then it's like, that. And that's your focus for however much time you want to put into the working, and until it comes back to you in the form of your wish is granted.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask you about deities. So you mentioned that, and it feels, I was really contemplating that myself, because there's many to speak to. And it's really interesting because, again, I mentioned that I follow a lot of yogic traditions and certainly know about Lakshmi, and to talk to her about wealth, and I have a great, I was over in India and managed to get like a really cool wall hanging of her, and yet there's also other goddesses with other aspects. So it seems like the obvious. Who doesn't want love and wealth? So of course it's Lakshmi, but there's so many other ones as well. Okay, so that's just the Indian tradition. So how do you choose? And then are you pulling from the pantheon of the Greek, Roman?
I personally do.
Okay.
I've had a long relationship with the god Mercury for a whole variety of reasons, and didn't look for it. Kind of woke up one day and realized that we'd been in a relationship for a while, and I thought it was a one-night stand, and no, it turns out a little bit longer. But I think most people find their relationship with deity because they realize that they need a particular energy in their life or for working. And so they go finding that name that best suits. The most common probably is the Greek/Roman pantheon, which are two different pantheons. I want to be very clear.
Oh, yeah. Sorry to make it.
We muddle them a lot. They are very, very different. And they will wrap me upside the head if I get that wrong.
Okay. So, no, that's important. Thank you. Big takeaway.
Yeah. And then the very general Celtic pantheon, which that is such a broad term for such a wide variety of deity. I almost feel like I have to ask their forgiveness for being so very, very broad, but it kind of works, and that's how most people think about it. That's mostly where people start, and then they're kind of go to other traditions and cultures for names. The tricky part is, I think, where people can kind of get into trouble is not understanding the different cultures do, in fact, have different deities. And just because you want a sun deity doesn't necessarily mean that you should put pick the first one that comes up in your web search.
Okay.
There's reasons for maybe choosing Amaterasu, the Japanese goddess of the sun, over, I'm going blank, a Norse god.
Right.
I'm forgetting his name, and I do apologize for that. But there, go do the research, someone.
We'll leave it in the YouTube comments.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason for choosing one over the other, and because they have different energy. So, for absolute beginners, I'm kind of like, you don't necessarily have to have a name. Just describe the energy that you're looking for, and you don't necessarily have to work with a specific deity. And you actually never need to work with a deity if you want to be a witch. It's not at all required. There are members of my coven, for example, who have no connection with deity whatsoever. They work with the energy of the universe, is what they tap into when we do ritual and stuff like that. So the rest of us are using a name, and they're like, yeah, it's a name. Okay, but that name could be Steve or Joe for all of the energy that they have. And actually one of them, their craft name was Steve for about a year, just because they were making a point, and it was a really good point to make. And so, the rest of us are working with a different name to tap into a specific energy, but they don't work that way, and they don't need to, and it works just fine. So if you don't feel a connection to deity, it's not at all required. Connecting to the energy of the universe is kind of how we do our work. Mm-hmm. So if you don't feel that, I'm not quite sure you really want to be a witch.
If you don't feel that, I'm not so sure you'd probably still be watching the episode at this point.
Well, there is that. I'm not quite sure why you're here, but that's
right.
Okay.
We're not sure why you're here, but I mean, that's really is what we're working towards, right, Lisa? Is higher consciousness, and we're here to uplift, right? And you have written a book that really is a great primer for people that would just like to explore some of these and demystify some of these possibilities to find what I feel is an incredible ancient practice, and yet is being updated and modernized and is adaptable, to use your word, right? Is being adaptable up into the here and now. So, again, Lisa's book is Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice, and I think we kind of labeled the show sort of that, talking about the journey of it. And that's what you and I have had a chance to do, and in travel, in choosing, different times in our lives, how we're practicing and where we're practicing and with what we're practicing. So you've got many, many great suggestions, and I know there's so much more to explore in your book, and I hope everyone checks it out, and I know I sure will.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm glad you really liked reading it. That's nice to hear.
No, it's a beauty. Lisa, thank you. I will say obrigada, one or two Portuguese words. And I hope you come back to the States sometimes. Come and see us in Los Angeles if you do. And but until then, we'll see you online. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you. Boa noite.
It's great. Hey, everybody. So it was really wonderful for you to listen in on really what we're trying to share. And these are tools and ideas for you to come to yourself and really go deeper, to listen and sort of maybe keep the crazy of the outer world at bay. All right. Tune in, feel good. And at the same time, you will hopefully like and share and follow and let people know what we're trying to do here at Truth Be Told. Remember that Tony's Suite is on Fridays at 3 p.m. live if you'd like to send him some messages and connect with the community there. We will have upcoming live event, so check out Parapod Festival. We're really excited to be talking to you about that in 2023. And until then, I send you all my blessings, and please stay well and be sure to be in touch if there's anything that we can help clarify for you. Clarity, word of the year. Shine on, everyone.